Well, hello, Convention of State supporters. My name is Andrew Woodruff. Welcome to another episode of COS Live. Rita Peters is out again. She'll be back in 2 weeks. We look forward to her return. Until then, we have an exclusive interview with Steve Deace, who is a Convention of States endorser, and his recent book, Faucian Bargain, hit #1. It is on the best-selling. And he exposes the corruption with the DC bureaucracy and everything related to COVID. And he is attempting to expose how we need to shut the door on big government before they have any more mischief with this COVID pandemic. But before we get to that exclusive interview, of course, we have our Article 5 trivia giveaway question with COS Vice President Mike Ruthenberg. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. It is such a pleasure to be here and see everybody come and join our COS Live on this wonderful Tuesday. And I am excited to do a couple of things. One is I want to describe our giveaway, which of course everybody likes. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot of, especially since our store was closed, the shop conventionofstates.com is now open. And we've got some limited selection. Our biggest seller, of course, is the Hell No Joe t-shirt. And I don't have it here to show it to you, but go to shopconventionofstates.com and you can see it and you can get one. They're shipping right now. We have a whole bunch of other shirts, and starting tomorrow on sale, packets of 10 and 25 pocket guides. This is our best-selling item in the store. We're excited to bring it back, and they're in the warehouse. Tomorrow, they'll go up on shopconventionstates.com. But in the meantime, I'm going to give these away to the person that answers the question, because they're so coveted and they're so needed by so many people in the organization. Because when you pull out one of these things, I always keep it handy. You can hand it to somebody and it'll explain Convention of States better than I can, better than most people can. And it's just a handy tool to have to get people on board. We're currently, as you know, at about 5 million supporters, and we're on our way to 35 million supporters. And boy, we've been spooling up. People are coming in faster than ever, and the Pocket Guide is such a great tool for that. Again, you can get it at shopconventionofstates.com. But for now, I want to give this away to someone who will absolutely deserve it if you can answer this trivia question. And the trivia question is important because if you know where you're coming from, you know who the people are that you're supporting when you give your time, when you give your honor, when you give sometimes your money and your support to Convention of States. Who are the people, here's the question, that founded, who are the co-founders of the Convention of States project? It's an important thing to know. It's an important thing to ask and understand, and I will tell you the answer at the end of the show, and I'll tell you a little bit about both of them. I know them both very well. They're both amazing people, and it's important to know where we came from. So who are the founders of the Convention of States project? I'll be back a little bit later. Now I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew, for an amazing interview today. I know we're going to have just a massive number of people to see Steve Deace.
Well, we are honored to bring back Steve Deace onto the program. He is a Convention of States endorser. He is also the host of the Steve Deace Show on Blaze TV. He has been an advisor for several presidential campaigns. He has also written many best-selling books, including Rules for Patriots, A Nefarious Plot, A Nefarious Carol, and of course, Truth Bombs, where he makes a very strong case for an Article 5 Convention of States. And his newest book, it hit #1 on Amazon within the very first week. The Faucian Bargain, the most powerful and dangerous bureaucrat in American history. Steve Deace, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the immediate success that your book saw within the first week.
Thanks, brother. Good to see you, Andrew. Appreciate being here, and big advocate of COS, so I'm happy to talk to your audience today.
Absolutely. Well, I want to jump right into my very first question, because the endorsements that you have seen from this book, they're basically a who's who of endorsers. And I will note that some of them are also Convention of States endorsers. Who would have thought that an organization like Convention of States, which wants to drain the swamp, and a book that goes after the most dangerous bureaucrat living in the swamp, would have the same endorsers? But you have seen endorsements from Governor Ron DeSantis, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Rand Paul, from Jason Whitlock, David Limbaugh, Mark Levin. You've even seen COS President Mark Meckler endorse this book. So did you expect this type of reaction to your book? And more importantly, what do you think is generating the success that soared your book to #1 within the first week?
I think it could very well be the most impressive list of endorsers that any right of center book will get this year, maybe in the last few years. And I think if we had a traditional publishing process where we were going to go and distribute hardcover to the bookstores, things of that nature, and there's a 4 to 6 month ramp up for that, I think there are several other impressive endorsements we could have landed that we just didn't have time to because we wanted to get the information in this book in as many hands as we could. That's why we went straight to paperback fulfillment on Amazon to bypass that and not wait 4 to 6 months. But I think it speaks to the importance of the moment. And ironically, it was actually my Catholic assistant, Todd Erzen, my co-author, who made this analogy when we released the book and it immediately debuted in the top 25 at Amazon. He said, this kind of reminds me of a 95 Theses, meaning that, prior to Luther, if you know your church history, there were other reformers or people who wanted to confront some things in the church that they thought had gone wayward. And because there was no way for them to get their message out to the masses, they either were shunned, ignored in some cases, like the would-be reformer John Wycliffe. They were burned at the stake, then they dug up their ashes and burnt them again. But Luther, despite the threats and everything against him, had the printing press. He had a modern invention that allowed him to get his information out into the general population. And his 95 Theses were kind of a galvanizer for the Reformation. And I think it's possible that this book is kind of a galvanizer for the revolution, to get our way of life back. That polls show Americans are the least afraid of coronavirus as they've ever been. People are sick of not getting answers, sick of the duplicity, including a ridiculous answer that Anthony Fauci gave just yesterday to a challenge from MSNBC of all places. And so I really think our book hit at the right time where, just prior to us asking for his endorsement, Rand Paul had just gone mano a mano with Anthony Fauci again in the Senate. Ron DeSantis is kind of on the front lines in the battle of what I like to call COVID stand right now. And so it just seemed like the timing was right to get this message out and to issue this challenge. And the right amount of people and some really powerful people are waging this battle and wanted to sign on in support. So it was just serendipity or providence, as the case may be.
I would like to say Providence might be the case, and the positive reaction that you've seen from this book. There's been a lot of positive reaction, but you haven't. There has been some negative reaction as well, and I want to point to the interview that you did on C-SPAN because that was just very. It was quite delicious. Some of the retorts that you had for people who came on to C-SPAN to criticize you. And usually C-SPAN puts people to sleep, but man, you made it so lively. And one of the responses that, or one of the persons who came on who was questioning you, they said, "Who are you to question Anthony Fauci? What credentials do you have?" And your response was just so delicious. And I'm hoping that you could share a little bit about how you responded and just some of the pushback that you've seen from your book release.
Indeed. Karen Stan came out in full effect on C-SPAN last week. I had a blast with that, though. I do that every day if I could. But as they say down in the South, when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one you hit, right? And so Karen Stan, it was almost like they could sense I gave them the come hither, that they knew that a lot of this was about them, and that like a moth to a flame, brother, they could not resist the temptation to show their rear end. And so I was just happy to smack it a few times for them since they're going to put it out there. And the one call you mentioned, I remember it vividly. And I said to her, "Hey, I'm a damned American. That's who has the right to question these bureaucrats. Me, you, and everybody within the sound of my voice. We're damned Americans. So we have that right, number one. But number two, I asked her, what right do you have to question Dr. Martin Kulldorff, Harvard University, #1 university in the United States. What right do you have to question Dr. Tony Katz, Dr. Harvey Risch? Those two are from Yale, top 3, top 4 university in the United States. Dr. John Ioannidis, head of World Population Health at Stanford University, top 5 university in the United States. Sunitri Gupta, the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, both of those hail from Oxford University, rated the #1 university in the world. So, I mean, if by your own premise, I mean, what right? They don't agree with lockdowns. They don't agree with this with this first ever lockdown and quarantine of the healthy in the history of plagues in humanity. They don't agree with a lot of the masquerade. So by your own standard, I said to her, what right do you have to question these counter experts from illustrious and esteemed institutes of higher learning? Where do you have the right to question them? And so what really stuck out to me about that appearance is there is a growing segment of Americans that are just preening, dying literally for subjugation. They cannot wait to be under the thumb of the state. They're longing to be slaves. And instead of, and I should say there have been more and more people, in fact, on the left. One of my new best friends is longtime left-wing feminist theorist, author, Naomi Wolf, of all people, is one of my new friends. We have chatted regularly the last few weeks. Bill Maher has been a critic of this. There are voices on the left that are like, what in the Sam Hill is this? There's nothing liberal or civil liberty about what's going on here. And that's why I think we're kind of transcending now the traditional right-left Venn diagram. We're really dealing now with the spirit of the age, a rising tide of people who long to be enslaved, that they have been indoctrinated into a slave mindset. And so I come along and hand them the antidote with all the receipts. There's more footnotes in this book than pages, over 200 fully documented footnotes that give them the information they need to get their lives back. Because I'm guessing a lot of Democrats like to go into movies, ball games, and to see Hamilton too, right? And instead they turn on you like you're Moses. And what do you mean? I mean, now we've got to go get the straw to make our own bricks too. I mean, we were perfectly happy being slaves here. In fact, we look forward to it. At least in Egypt, we had meat to eat. And there's a rising tide, Andrew, of a slave mentality in America. People that want to be subjugated by an all-powerful state. And I think that is something to be very afraid of going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked just a moment ago about the counter experts that you outline in your book, and you mentioned Yale, Harvard, Oxford. You mentioned like basically the cream of the crop schools, and they all are against, or they have different opinions about lockdowns than Anthony Fauci and about masks. And these are, a second opinion, I guess you could say, from like a doctor's perspective. But Anthony Fauci, on the other hand, he has never backed off of the efficacy of lockdowns, the efficacy of mask wearing. But one of the things about Dr. Fauci is he seems to sometimes contradict himself. And he's even admitted to lying in the past. And I'm specifically pointing to the New York Times article where he talks about trying to nudge people in the right direction to taking the vaccine. If I manipulate the herd immunity kind of data, push it from 75% to 80%, maybe the American people will be more in favor of taking the vaccine. And of course, there was the masks don't work, masks do work. They going back and forth with that. How can the American people, how can they trust the federal government to handle issues or to handle a crisis in the future if they can't get the facts straight and if they keep manipulating data like this?
They can't. And it's one of the main points of our book is a 9/11 style of tribunal is needed here. One, to get answers to all of these inconsistencies. You mentioned a couple of key ones. One of the ones that we zero in on in the book is on February 28th of last year. Anthony Fauci wrote in the esteemed New England Journal of Medicine, analyzing the fatality ratio for COVID-19. He projected that it would be about a pandemic level flu. And you know what? When you look today, the case fatality rate, that's what's important for you as a patient when you go see a doctor and you're diagnosed with something, you're a case. You want to know what the case fatality rate is. Right now in America, the case fatality rate for COVID-19, saying that every one of these deaths we've cataloged are all legit. Nothing's been exaggerated at all. Well, the current CFR is 1.8% for COVID today, which means if you are diagnosed with COVID, as a general average number, you have a 98.2% chance of recovering from it on a case-by-case basis. However, the infection fatality rate, which is more important for those of us that don't have COVID, and so we're looking at this from a broader public policy standpoint, meaning how many people could get infected based on decisions we make about resuming and returning to normal life, that's even more important. And our CDC estimates at least 10 times more cases than we have identified. Now, around the world, those numbers are higher. In fact, our own antibody seroprevalence studies show it's a much higher percentage of people than just 10 times more infections than tests. Look at the fact they've hit a herd immunity threshold with 50% seroprevalence in Southern California, for example. But we'll go with the 10 times because that's a nice round number. It's conservative estimate. Well, that would put the infection fatality rate for COVID-19 at 0.18%, when the IFR for the flu is 0.1. So we're right around a pandemic level of flu, just like Fauci forecast in the New England Journal of Medicine. But yet after he made, and hey, those are important numbers, okay? No question about it. But after he made a modest assessment, which turned out to be accurate, of the threat level of COVID-19, 11 days later, he went to Congress and went full Denethor, run for your lives, Minister's on fire. Okay, I mean, it's over. That night, the NBA, college basketball shut down. Concerts around the country went dark. By the end of the week, the country was shut down. And we have no idea what new piece of data, what new piece of information he received in those 11 days that completely changed his perspective on this. In fact, his original assumptions that respiratory virus outbreaks are not spread by asymptomatic carriers, the data shows true. That masks don't work, data shows true. The fatality ratios for COVID, the data shows true. I mean, his early on diagnosis here absolutely nailed it. And so what changed from that point? I mean, he on March 8th is when he went on 60 Minutes and told everybody there's no point to wearing a mask. So in those 11 days, he did a Linda Blair exorcist level about face. And I think we need to know why. Because I think you alluded to a key point here, Andrew. We're in a situation right now where half the country wants this to be a lot more serious than it actually is. They're like, how dare you take my apocalyptic event away from me? But another half of the country now has been conditioned that should we indeed face a plague level that other generations of humanity has faced in history or other parts of the world are facing right now? Should we actually face that? Now the other side of our country has been told, and hey, you know what? Don't believe it. You're being gaslighted. You're being lied to. Well, that's not a good situation either. We need to reestablish a plumb line here. There needs to be, and I've said this to members of Congress that I know that have endorsed the book we're talking about. When you get control of committees again, we need a 9/11 style of tribunal. We need to follow the chain of evidence. We need to trace back what Anthony Fauci thought and when did he think it, because we need to reestablish good practices here for how to deal with something like this should unfortunately we have to deal with something even more serious in the future.
And we are speaking with Steve Deace, who is a Convention of States endorser, and he's also the author of the #1 bestseller right now, Faucian Bargain. So perhaps the most important theme of your book is about vesting too much power. And you were just talking about this just a second ago. So talking about vesting too much power in one single person. And the American founding was really a rejection from those principles, the idea of putting too much power in one person or even one group of people. But what we are seeing right now is there is people who just want to say, follow the science and trust the experts. And we are just hearing this as a trope over and over and over again. And you write in your book a quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower that was really interesting. And it says, in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. It seems to me that Eisenhower is painting kind of like a rule by philosopher kings outlined in Plato's Republic. So do you think that we are succumbing to rule by elites from a distant capital in DC and kind of divorcing ourselves from the Republican principles of self-government and allowing decision making to be spread out across, through federalism. After all, the words on the framing document say, "We the people, not trust the experts."
We are, but I think it's even worse than that, because we don't even allow our experts to debate one another. As we've already talked about and cited several specific examples of experts that probably also believe in 57 genders at their school and the Earth's going to fry in 10 years from global warming. They probably believe all that stuff too, and yet they thought this was all flat Earth voodoo bunk and didn't understand why we were quarantining healthy people or anything of that nature. I mean, look at the control group we had this last year. I mean, who would have thought that, hey, the next time there's a global health crisis, the country that gave us Greta Thunberg will be the contrarian control group. And yet here we were with Sweden playing control group last year. And for those who say, hey, well, it would have been even worse if we didn't lock down, the unverifiable falsification scenario, basically something we could never know, so therefore it must be true. Well, Sweden provides the answer to that. In 2020, Sweden had 7% higher excess deaths than their 4-year pre-COVID average. The rest of the European Union was between 12 and 18%. They were the only EU country that did not do a massive lockdown. They also have the lowest mask compliance in all of the Western world in Sweden. So there's your control group that answers this. And yet suddenly, after 20 years, all my life consuming conservative media, all my career working in it, I've been told by our left-wing friends we need to be more like Sweden. And then suddenly, when people like me are like, you know what, maybe Sweden's got some good ideas, suddenly it was like, what's a Sweden? Never heard of it. Don't know what it is. Okay. And that's that. See, it would be one thing to be ruled by what you're describing as an oligarchy or some form of a plutocracy, right? But what we're really talking about here, Andrew, is straight up fascism, which is we're not even just letting the smartest people in the room handing over our control to them and say, you guys tell us how to live. And then they come out of some smoke-filled room with the best ideas. We're not even doing that. That's dangerous enough, right? Assuming that somehow they're unassailable, they're infallible, and therefore they have risen above the rest of us and transcend the frailties and sinfulness of human nature. That would be dangerous enough. But we're not even doing that. We're saying you're not even an expert that gets into the smoke-filled room unless you buy into a particular narrative. That's straight up fascism. And what we're looking at here is a precursor version of it. And even worse, it's populist in nature, because what we're seeing is, and my co-author Todd Erzin and I saw this in the research we did for this book. And Anthony Fauci even admitted this on Sunday on MSNBC. Prior to COVID-19, there was no data that showed masks work. And he's right. And by the way, there is still none. All of the studies that have been cited, none of them have a control group, so they're not real studies. And we have real-time data that shows they don't work. Michigan, my former home state today, is the worst state by far in the country for new COVID cases and COVID hospitalizations. They've been under a 6-month emergency mask mandate since last October. With 6 months of a head start, the masks couldn't stop Michigan from plunging into the worst state in all of COVID-stan as we speak right now. So forget studies. None of them have control groups. The one country that did was Denmark. Notice they don't mask their people. Every other one of these studies, no control group. And all the studies prior to COVID showed masks don't work. And when we went back and read some of those studies that were as recent as April of last year at Michael Osterholm's University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease, he works in the Biden administration now. Those things have been retconned now and updated with disclaimers, basically saying don't ratio us on Twitter because we used to tell you the truth and we know you don't want to hear that. That's what makes this even worse. Is we're not even just hiring this out to the philosopher kings, but you have to believe in a particular philosophy. And then the mob on social media of Mountain Dew red addicts, as mom does their basement in their skinny jeans, cleaning the avocado toast crumbs off their sleeves, that they then fuel all of this, the desire to please these unruly, spirit of the age social media mobs. It's the worst of every world.
That was great how you explained those social media mob being in the basement with the avocado toast. I couldn't help but just like laugh on the inside. That was great. And it's so true. You talk about on your show, you've said many times about Dr. Anthony Fauci being the highest paid bureaucrat right now in the government. And he's been in the federal government for decades. And I guess it shows you that it doesn't matter what your intentions or the credentials that you have, you can still be corrupted. And vesting too much power in him, you run the risk. I think we've ran the risk and it's happened where power corrupts, and then absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you can make an argument that Fauci has been corrupted absolutely. But as you say in your book, that Fauci is not some aberration. In other words, this could happen to any bureaucrat, and that there are, you say, the likes of Fauci within the DC swamp are legion. Or in other words, there are plenty of bureaucrats that we could pick from to put in front of the TV to spout off these facts that don't line up with reality. But at Convention of States, we talk about being the solution as big as the problem. We talk about being the solution as big as the DC swamp, being the solution as big as the DC bureaucracy. With that being said, one of our amendment ideas covers term limits for elected officials. But we could take that resolution because of the language, we could extend that beyond just elected officials and also go into bureaucrats. So if a convention was called, would you support an amendment that would also limit the amount of time that the Anthony Fauci's within the bureaucracy could stay within the DC swamp?
Absolutely. I don't think a lot of our viewers understand he's 80 years old. 80. And if he had retired at 75 or 70, as most Americans do, I don't know what would be different. I just think that another creature would have emerged from the Black Lagoon. He's not some anti-Christical character. This isn't Nikolai Carpathia in the shadows manipulating his way into a preeminent stature and malevolently seizing the moment right when it arrived. He's a construct of a system of malevolence. So if he had retired or wasn't here, it would have just been somebody else, maybe with a different personality. It would have been Debbie Bedazzle Your Face Shield Burks and her obsession with IHME models that are constantly wrong. Who knows what would have been? That's the problem. I mean, the system just regurgitates as a higher birth rate than the American people do, which frankly wouldn't take much when you look at our latest demographics. But that's really the issue here. And I think it goes back to the founding. I've used this theological analogy in the past. They weren't officially political parties, but kind of the first two camps our founders broke into were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And and if both sides were like, believed in, it had a church split. But they both believed in some form of theological orthodoxy. But the Federalists were kind of your Arminians. There's still some good in people. We can give them some free choice. That they'll do the right stuff. And the Anti-Federalists are kind of like the Calvinists, who are like, what part of total depravity do you not understand? If we don't spill this out very specifically, then the brute force or the raging inferno of government, like Washington described it, will blaze. And that's where your Bill of Rights came from, was kind of a compromise between those two camps to be more specific about what government. So the Constitution lays out the 18 enumerated powers of what the government can do. And then the Bill of Rights comes forward and says, okay, and now, because we know your imagination is going to run wild with how to spin these things, here's what you cannot do. But neither side of this camp could envision, because there is no solution. What would happen if the people became so complacent that it's not that they're lazy, Bob, as it says in one of my all-time favorite movies, Office Space, it's that they just don't care. And that's where we're at right now. The level of complacency, we're now calling it a great victory because on Friday night, the U.S. Supreme Court, by one vote, was benevolent enough to acknowledge that you have a right to worship God in your own home in California. All right, one vote. In the founding generation, they'd have tarred and feathered a public official who tried to say you don't have a right to do that. Right there in public, and everybody would have applauded. Now you get to this all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's 5-4 to decide, yeah, your home, you can worship God if you want. And I think this just goes to show how far gone the system is. But here is the good news. It's the Samuel Adams, revelation or observation about history. It's always the committed minority, right? It's Gideon's 300. It's the 300 at Thermopylae. It's the 110 disciples in an upper room. It's the 56 signers to the Declaration. It's always the committed minority. And so that's where groups like COS can take advantage, actually. If you're organized, if your people are committed, you can actually take advantage of the complacency in the country by outworking the other demographics. That's what the Spirit of the Agers on the other side did. They just outworked everybody and took advantage of their complacency. There's no rule that says you guys can't do the same.
Mm-hmm. And one of the fascinating things about your book, and you were just kind of talking about this though, and just a second ago, is you mention the kind of spiritual aspect behind the COVID hysteria. You call it the Branch Covidian cult, which is a funny play on words on the Branch Davidians. And there are prominent figures, not just like loons that you pull from the street, but there's actual prominent figures who are saying things like, "In Fauci we trust," which is just a perversion of "In God we trust." And they're wearing shirts that have Fauci's face printed on them. I've even seen like votive candles that you could buy on Etsy and that you could buy on Amazon. And it's, creepy and gross. They're holding Dr. Fauci in this like almost like religious icon, kind of elevating him above the being a doctor and being a religious icon, because no one knew who Dr. Anthony Fauci was before March 2020. Why do you think people are putting like a spiritual significance and a devotion to this bureaucrat who is quickly becoming the face of centralization of DC power?
Last week, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer did a national TV appearance where she had a Dr. Fauci face emblazoned a pillow right behind her there on her set. And here's the truth. This is an undeniable, in honor of the passing of Rush Limbaugh last month. This is an undeniable fact of life. It's an undeniable fact. What I'm about to say is an undeniable fact of 6,000 plus years of recorded human history. Every single culture, everyone, regardless of time, place, custom, color, creed, language, irrelevant. Every single culture in this of our species ever recorded, either collectively, doesn't mean unanimously, doesn't mean perfectly, but collectively, either worships the Creator, the one true living God, or will worship idols, period. Or as James Dobson once eloquently put it, there's only two worldviews in the history of humankind. God is or he isn't. That's it. And he's right. And what we've seen in our culture is the more and more we have turned away from God, the more and more we have turned to idolatry. And the problem you have when you turn to idolatry, you get scammed, you get fooled. You don't know which end of that idol to burn for fuel and which end to worship. You end up putting your baby up on top of the altar to either Molech or Planned Parenthood. And then ultimately you turn against one another. Idolatry always leads to sectarianism, always leads to tribalism, always leads to division within a culture because, I kind of like my idol better than you like yours. And I think my idol should be sitting there at the head of the table instead of yours. And so collective worship of God gives us e pluribus unum. Idolatry gives us other stuff, all of it bad. And unfortunately, we are well down that highway to hell in our country as well. And the cult-like status of Anthony Fauci as some sort of apocalypto high priest of the Druid or Mayan temple of Branch Covidianism is just the latest manifestation of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think the most important part of your book is it's all about daring to ask questions. And kind of like you said earlier, giving people a platform, the experts platform to argue these points and debate these points. Because in a republic, we have to, the onus is on us, we the people, to hold the federal government accountable. So there is a lot more in this book that we're not going to be able to get to. But if there was like one thing that you'd want the viewers to be left with about this book, what would it be?
That there is wisdom in a multitude of counsel. There's a reason why two bedrocks of our healthcare system are informed consent and the ability to get a second opinion. And the reality is we didn't consent to any of this. Anthony Fauci has acquired more power than any singular individual in American history. There is no one watching right now, no one within the sound of my voice, whose individual life, whose family, whose school, whose church, whose place of business, whose way of life, whether you can go outside and breathe free air. There is no one whose life has not been either turned upside down or been taken control of by Anthony Fauci, and that's without a single vote cast, mail order, or any other method. All right, that is not good. All right, and so where was our second opinion? Why did we never ever consult these other experts, especially during the first 15 days to flatten the curve when we all agree, let's take a deep breath, see what we're up against here? That was the time to bring in the experts. We never did. We just stuck to this one failing narrative instead. All right. And so where was our second opinion? Where was our informed consent? Anybody that's watching right now, a doctor comes to you and says, hey, a vital, sensitive part of your anatomy, I must remove because I detected a mass there. You're not going to say, all right, cut it out now. You're probably going to, before you give up that arm, that limb, maybe something more sensitive, you're going to say, I think I want to get a second opinion on that. And any doctor worthy of having would be fine with you doing so and not feel defensive. How come when Anthony Fauci is pressed, he's pushed back on, he gets defensive? Where's the informed consent? Where's the second opinion? The lack of that. Two bedrocks of our individual healthcare system. It's presumed that if you have a heart attack, if you have a heart issue, you get to make the consent about whether to get quadruple bypass or not, even though you don't have a medical degree. Why were we not given that informed consent? And how come we have yet to find for second opinions? Last week or 2 weeks ago, Governor Ron DeSantis held a conference with several of those counter experts that I just mentioned from some of the best institutions of higher learning in the world. And YouTube just took it down and the media ignored it. Why? All the answers to that question are bad.
Well, Steve, if people want to order your book, where can they go? And if they want to hear more from you, where can they go as well?
Best place to get the book is over on Amazon.com. Now, if you don't want to give them any or more of your money, I don't blame you. It just got listed at BarnesandNoble.com just a couple of days ago as well. So Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Faucian Bargain.
And where can we go to listen into your show?
BlazeTV.com/my last name Deace, or just search for Steve Deace on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon, Spotify.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to go through your new book, Faucian Bargain, and just being able to dissect why Anthony Fauci is the most dangerous and most powerful bureaucrat in American history. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back again soon.
You bet, guys. Take care. Appreciate the work you do. God bless.
All right. Well, I'm sure that nobody was disappointed by that amazing interview. And I am back, of course, Mike Ruthenberg from the Convention to States Project with our trivia answer. And if you remember way back to the beginning, first, before I tell you the answer, I want to tell you the prize. The person that got this answer first won this pack of 10 pocket guides. They go on sale tomorrow in our Convention to States store. Shop conventionofstates.com is the address to the store. It's easy to remember. Shop conventionofstates.com. And the question, our trivia question of the week was, who are the co-founders of the Convention of States Project? There are two of them. And the answers are, number one, boy, I'm certainly sure that most of you got this answer, and that is Mark Meckler. Mark Meckler was one of the co-founders of the Convention of States Project. Of course, he comes to us from the Tea Party days. He's one of the founders of Tea Party Patriots, one of the co-founders of Tea Party Patriots, did an amazing job changing history in the Tea Party movement. Before that, you may not know, he was an intellectual property attorney. He was not a politician. He was not that involved in politics, but he knew that if it was to be, it was up to him to be able to drive the message of the grassroots and to build a grassroots army in the Tea Party. And we're doing it again with Convention of States Project, 5 million strong. The other co-founder, Michael Farris. And if you know Michael Farris, you may know him as the founder and president of Patrick Henry College, an amazing college that puts out many, many people in the area of politics, the kind of people you want to see in politics. But that's not all. He is also a constitutional attorney. He's currently with the Alliance Defending Freedom, an amazing religious freedom organization. But in his old days, he was an Article 5 expert as a practicing attorney. And he is, I think he's the only guy alive that has argued Article 5 in the Supreme Court during the days of the Equal Rights Amendment. And he is an expert. And he believed, it was originally his idea, that we start an Article 5 movement to restrain the power, scope, and jurisdiction of federal government. It can work. It will work. Mark loved the idea, and the rest is history. That project started in June of 2013. I was there. Super exciting to watch it grow to now 5 million strong. Congratulations to you if you're the one that won our pocket guides. If you want to get a t-shirt or pocket guides, all you have to do is go to shopconventionestates.com. Thanks for listening. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Mike. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We've had an amazing interview with Steve Deace, and I know right now it seems really desperate right now because corrupt DC politicians, they keep steamrolling your rights. Every chance they get, they insert their greasy hands into your lives and want to control more of what you do. They want to take away the decisions that you should be applying in your life, and they want to have those decisions. They want to centralize power in DC with career politicians and corrupt bureaucrats. But you know what? You don't have to sit on the sideline because the founding fathers knew we would be in this situation right now, and they gave us a solution. It's in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. One of the great things about Convention of States is we are using the Constitution to save the Constitution, because the founders knew that the federal government would go well beyond the enumerated authority that was given to them by the people. It's in Article 5, the second clause, when 2/3 of the states get together to pass identical applications, they can call a convention of states where we can propose amendments to limit the size, the scope, and the jurisdiction of the federal government. We are so close. 15 states have passed the COS resolution. 34 is the magic number. Once we hit 34, that will trigger the very first Article 5 Convention of States, where we can implement term limits, fiscal restraints, and reduce the jurisdiction and the federal overreach that we have seen over the course of the last 100 years. We'll be able to roll all of that back. But we need your help. So if you have not signed the Convention of States petition, go to www.conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, and then make sure to share it with your friends and family. The next thing that you need to do is you need to take action. We need people on the front line who are ready to bring this Convention of States to a reality. So go to the Take Action portion of the Convention of States page and join your local team. Become a leader within your community. Become a district captain or a member in your local community to forward Convention of States. Well, after you do that, make sure that you follow us on social media. Go to Twitter, Instagram, Parler, MeWe, Gab, Facebook, wherever you are getting your social media buzz. Make sure that you are liking and sharing the content there. And of course, you need to check out the Battle Cry with COS co-founder and president, Mark Meckler. It's on at 8 p.m. Eastern time every single Sunday. You get your dose of Mark Meckler, which is never quite enough, but you also get to hear about everything related to COS, and then you also get to hear some of the news stories that are working their way around the country. So it's definitely a great place to go check out. And I'm not sure if you knew this, but the COS store is now open, which means there are t-shirts there. For instance, there's the No Joe t-shirt, Hell No Joe t-shirt. You're not going to be able to take our AR-15, Joe. Go get that t-shirt. There's also the Defiant t-shirt. There's the original COS Rally t-shirt. And of course, there are a whole bunch of other t-shirts that are available for you. It's so exciting to have the COS store back up. And remember that we need you to come next Tuesday for another edition of COS Live, same time, same place, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And if you're looking for the person who's going to save the Republic, look in the mirror because it's going to be you. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of COS Live. We'll see you next time.